say thank you very much to all three of our speakers. And I'm going to hand over now to Jonas, Dr. Kurlberg from Centre for Digital Theology and Spurgeon College, who's going to be our panel moderator today. So over to you, Jonas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Toby. And thank you for all the work that you've done to make this event happen. Well done, and your team as well. Hello and welcome. It's so good to be with you here on Discord to be able to discuss the Bible in digital media. I'm Jonas Kurlberg, and I work at Spurgeon's College, where I manage the MA in Digital Theology, and I'm the co-director or the deputy director of the Centre for Digital Theology. It's really good to have seen all the introductions on Discord already. There are so many people in this room that have got amazing experiences, and I'm sure there's lots of collective wisdom, and we'll draw upon some of that just after our presentations. Please feel free to add your comments or your questions in the chat, or just maybe write them down as you hear the presenter speak. So first we're going to hear from Paul Williams, who is the CEO of the British Bible Society, which is obviously an organization that has been instrumental in bringing the Bible to millions of people in this country and abroad as well, and for almost 200 years, which is quite incredible. Perhaps we could describe it as a digital migrant in terms of engagement with the Bible in digital culture. Paul himself has experience of working in business in London and as a professor in marketplace theology at Regent's College in Vancouver. And in a blog for the Evangelical Alliance, he says about the Bible Society, he says this: at the Bible Society, we're committed to listening well to spiritually open audiences, helping them engage with the Bible for themselves, and using the creativity and all the creativity and the care we can to do this. All of this is about loving neighbors and practicing obedient discipleship. But at the end of the day, God is the one who works through his words in the power of the Holy Spirit. After Paul, we'll hear from Jon as well. And Jon is the co-founder of the Bible Project. And I'm sure all of us have seen the amazing animations that they have made. Maybe we can describe the Bible Project as the digital native new kid on the block of a biblical literacy. Jon has studied theology at Multnomah and worked in IT before setting up the Bible Project. But most importantly, he is a friend of my childhood friend and Swedish socialist Andreas. In an interview for the Alabaster, Jon identified himself as an explainer. I like to think of myself as an explainer first and a storyteller second. As an explainer, I want to take ideas that are complicated and feel inaccessible, boil them down, distill them, and help people understand them. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say. And again, just a reminder that this is being recorded. So in the Q&A, if you are making comments, those will be recorded as well. So everyone's clear about that. Paul, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jonas. It's really great to be in this conversation. We've already had some fascinating conversations in the various rooms I've been in. And I'm really excited to learn from so many interesting people and fantastic projects and innovative ideas that I'm coming across. I'm going to cut to the chase because I've been told to take 7 minutes, I think. So and just this is like a conversation starter, how we're thinking about Bible engagement online, digital Bible mission from the Bible Society point of view. So few points from me. I think I want to start with the largest possible picture, which is that Bible engagement is God's initiative. So God chose a particular way of engaging humanity through words. And it's very interesting to, we might want to come back to what was the process here. Orality was incredibly important. Obviously, writing is why we have Bible. But over time, we've also seen the significance of different communication cultures that we might want to reflect on the oral, the visual, the print, and of course we're talking as well, especially about digital. But I wanted to start with that point that Bible engagement is one of God's primary ways of bridging the gap. He's reaching across a gap to engage with humanity, draw us back into a relationship with him. Through the Bible's words, we can actually encounter Jesus and God and find the life of God coming into us and be transformed. So at the highest level, that's what we're dealing with. Now, the context, it seems to us at Bible Society right now, and I'm going to focus on talking about the Western world, but there are ways in which this is true throughout the world. We're doing a massive global project on this right now, is one in which, on the one hand, the church, relative to previous eras, has lost confidence in the Bible. And we could lay out all of what that means and why that is. But wider society is becoming more open. And in the quote that Jonas gave, it's always frightening to hear yourself quoted back from an internet source. I spoke about spiritually open. We are really exercised about this. 1 in 4 of the population in Britain spiritually open to engaging more with the Bible. And we've seen this across the Western world, but not only in the West, in many, many parts of the world. We were in Vietnam with a group talking about Buddhist openness to spirituality that's non-Buddhist, and engaging with Christians and engaging with the Bible, but of course looking in all kinds of ways. So there's a huge opportunity, but will the church be ready and mobilized to take hold of it with a confidence in the Bible? That's a big question for us, and we want to work into that growing Bible confidence to lay hold of this opportunity. Now, digital is clearly part of it, and a massive part of it, because this is the revolution. If we think about the print revolution, we're now in the digital revolution, and I think that it's one level we can think of digital as a mission field, but on the other hand, it's also a medium. And when we think of it as a medium, this is an enormous revolution in the way in which we engage with material, learning, interaction, and so forth, as significant as print. So in that sense, it's a Tyndale moment. And Tyndale, of course, gave his life in the end to democratize access to the scripture so that the everyday person could engage and encounter God themselves. Now, I think, what would it be like for us to rise to the challenge of how might this digital revolution do that for the everyday person of the 21st century, that everyone could access that experience that's possible of engaging God for themselves. That's a question we're asking ourselves, is how can we enter into that? The thing is, every medium has its advantages, but also its drawbacks and its challenges. The print revolution, many cultural historians will talk about the way in which it gave people the gift of interiority, a sense of self-consciousness, self-awareness. But on the other hand, it's led to a hyper-individualism, a hyper-subjectivity. It's been part of the fragmentation of community life, and any other kind of pedagogy, learning institution, has been relativized by something that was partly driven by the print revolution. And of course, Bible reading was a primary driver of the print revolution in society. So it's interesting when we reflect on that. There was so much good that came out of that print revolution, but actually we're also seeing some of the negatives. And we could interestingly analyze the pros and cons of the oral, which of course is a foundational part of the biblical culture, but also the visual, and always saying every medium is politicized in a way. We've always got to ask about the context, the interpretive context. Who's controlling that context? What are the hierarchies of power? What are the dynamics of power? Where is there a reading community? Is it reinforcing class divisions or not? So there's all kinds of questions that we want to ask of any one of these mediums. And digital has the advantage, but also the danger that you've got aspects of the oral the visual, and the print all in one, the potential for incredible immersive experience. We could have the best of all possible worlds in the digital Bible engagement, but we could also have the worst of all possible worlds in which relationality and materiality and community are all even further eroded than we've seen in the worst dimensions of modernity. So how we design for digital Bible engagement is a really crucial theological question if we want to make sure that the outcomes are consonant. How can we do digital Bible engagement in ways that contribute to a healthy ecosystem of mediums of Bible engagement, where it also reinforces the oral, the visual, the print, and especially communal reading? Here's a little example of what I'm saying before I close. In the history of biblical, one of the crucial things about the Bible we know from Jesus is don't be just hearers of the word, be doers. So the Bible has to go into the material, the materiality of life, for it to really be engaged with. Now, one of the key ways in which that happens is memorization. And many of us will have had Bible memorization drummed into us at Sunday school or Christian schools or whatever. Now, digital can fragment memorization. Who needs to remember? I just look it up on Google. But could we design digital Bible engagement to encourage memorization? Can we gamify memorization of the text? Because that's one of the ways in which it's going to transmit into materiality. So I'm sure that there's such a creative room. You're going to have loads more ideas stimulated by that than I do. But that's a kind of design decision that seems to me really crucial at the heart of this. But what an exciting, we're right at the beginning of this. It's barely begun. And we probably should problematize some of our assumptions that things will carry on as they are. We have an incredibly unregulated digital environment. If we look at countries like China, let's not think that that kind of hyper-regulation couldn't come outside into other countries. And of course, in some countries, there's versions of it. How would we design for that? What if the Bible was banned on the internet? It's the most banned book in history. I'll leave it there. John's going to come with a lot more creative comments, but thanks for that chance to give an intro.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul, for that, and really helpful reflections on the medium and the medium's impact on wider human culture as well. John, over to you.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you, Paul. I'm really excited to be here with you all. I want to talk about how this place that we find ourselves in with this new revolution is nothing new, and that God's people have always been at the center, pushing the boundaries of communication technology. I'm an explainer, so I made some slides to walk through. This is an image of a story from Exodus 17, where the Israelites are in the wilderness and they've been attacked by another tribe of people, and Moses goes up on a hillside and he raises his staff. And as long as he's raising his staff, the Israelites are winning. If he lowers his staff, they start losing, and so he needs help from his brothers to keep that staff up. And when the battle is over, God says to Moses to write this story down so that future generations can remember it. And this is actually the first mention of writing the Bible in the Bible, which is interesting. But my question for us is, how would have Moses written the story down? More specifically, what alphabet would he have used? Moses lived in a time of human history where the Hebrew alphabet didn't exist. It won't have existed for another 500 years. In fact, the idea of the alphabet was a brand new communication technology in human history around the time of Moses. We actually have discovered it over 100 years ago, the Proto-Semitic alphabet, where Semitic people in this region of the world began to take Egyptian hieroglyphs, adapt those into a phonetic alphabet that they could use to write down their language on scrolls so they can remember their own stories. And so it's God telling Moses, use that communication technology. That's brand new to the planet. to remember this story. And that began the tradition of writing down these oral stories that eventually become the Bible. And this whole idea of using communication technology just continues, from tablets to scroll technology to the codex. Universities were created by the Catholic Church. The Gutenberg Bible, of course, with the printing press and the printing revolution, which Paul attended us to. Christians have been at the center, pushing the boundaries of all these communication technologies. And so at Bible Project, we are the new kids on the block in some regards, but we're part of a rich legacy. This is our story. This is our psyche that we get to continue on. So, I mean, if you're not familiar with Bible Project, we make videos that show themes and structure of the Bible. We have seminary level classes online that are free, and we built our own learning management system to house those because we weren't happy with any learning management systems out of the box. And we're also playing around with apps and learning environments and gamification and all of this stuff. And for us, we don't want to just react. We want to be on the forefront, pushing the boundaries of communication technology. So the Bible is a book, and a book is an enduring piece of communication technology. And a book really is just a collection of words. And it is, I love how Paul said it's the divine reaching out to us, bridging the gap so that we can interact. It's our connection to the God of the universe, to the creator of the universe. Every book is not the same, though, right? We come to a comic book differently than we come to a cookbook. We read a memoir differently than we read a sci-fi novel, and we read the constitution of any government differently than, say we would read a newspaper. And so every book has its own attributes. At Bible Project, we talk about 7 attributes that we really believe are what the Bible is. At the top is that the Bible is human and divine literature. This is Orthodox position that it's God's word, but it's also human words. There's a mystery there that we will not solve. Secondly, going around the clock here, it's unified literature. The Bible is a unified story. It's telling one story of God and humanity. It's messianic literature. That story leads to Jesus. It's communal literature. Yeah, we need to read it in community. Also, it's ancient literature. It was written thousands of years ago in a different time and place, people thinking about the world in completely different frameworks. And so the Jewish people in this, 2nd century Jewish culture compiling the final version of the Hebrew Bible, how did they think about what they were making? Were they making a rule book? Were they making a theology book? Were they making a devotional book? Well, in their minds, they had a very specific type of literature that they were swimming in. And we just call it meditation literature. It's literature that has stories and poetry. It combines law code intermixed. It's got parables. It's got all sorts of beautiful types of literature combined together. But in order for us to meditate, to read and reread, and it doesn't give us the answers right away. It kind of forces us to sit in it and go on a journey with it for a lifetime. And the point of all that is to give us God's wisdom and connect us with God's Spirit. So those are the attributes that we believe are what this book is doing. It's a very unique book. And so the question becomes, how do you engage such a unique book? And I'm not going to be able to talk about this in detail, but we really kind of are thinking through 3 modes to engage the Bible in any context, digitally or not. And we think of the Bible through elevation. So the modes are context, the ancient context, but then also connections. There's themes, there's hyperlinks, as like my colleague Tim likes to talk about, all over the Bible. But then we could also engage the Bible through the mode of structure. The Bible is a highly structured literary work. You could also look at elevations. So there's collections of scrolls, and that collection has a design. Scrolls themselves are designed. There's movements in each scroll, and each movement is just a combination of passages that are very highly designed. And then really at the bottom of all that is lines and words. And so we could use all these modes, looking at all these different elevations, and all of this is really to help us understand the Bible as ancient Jewish wisdom, meditation, messianic literature. And so at Bible Project, we're really interested in this puzzle, and this is what I want to bring you in on. I don't think a truly native digital Bible has been created, and we want to work on it. I don't know if we're the right ones to really accomplish it, but we want to take a spin on it. We want to build a natively digital Bible that navigates it as ancient Jewish meditation literature in these modes and elevations. And so a metaphor that I like to use is like print maps. We used to have maps printed on paper. You remember those? I'm old enough to remember those. And now maps are digitally native, way more dimension, way more ability to navigate. It's not a printed map now on a screen. It's something natively digital. What would that look like for the Bible? Bibles are stuck in the world of print. In fact, all books are stuck in the world of print. And I think it's Christians who get to be at the edge of communication technologies pushing this forward. All Bibles kind of look and feel the same. So what would it look like to start trying to take these modes and elevations and think about a natively digital Bible? We're just starting. We got a small team of engineers and designers and scholars working on this. We are committed to open source. And we're just working on proofs of concepts, trying to figure out how to do this. And where we're at right now at Bible Project is we think of our organization in 7-year cycles. We're just kind of in the second year of our second 7-year cycle. And by the end of the 7-year cycle, we want to have built something that kind of proves like, yes, this is what it would be. And then decide, are we the right ones to really take this to the finish line or not? And so I wanted to share this with you guys. One, just to encourage us, these questions and these thoughts that we're having around digital Bible is not new. These revolutions are not new. And Christians have always been at the edge of it. And as we think about digital, let's really think about the possibilities of taking this ancient, beautiful text that is God's word to us, and how can we navigate it in ways that are truly natively digital. And then I love, Paul, how you started talking about what are the controls to make sure that we do this in a way that actually builds the kingdom of God. So I'd love to talk more about that too.
Okay, thanks so much, John, and for making that clear. The kind of both the continuity, also perhaps the discontinuities, but it's very true that often we think of the church as being behind, but in history it's actually been at the forefront of a lot of technological development, not just within the Bible, but in arts and in architecture and so forth. Paul, I'm going to give you the opportunity to respond to John, if you'd like to do that.
Sure. Yeah, I absolutely love the natively digital Bible idea and the specifics of how you're thinking about that, John. I'm really excited about that. I'd love to engage more on it. I've got a sort of similar dream, if you like, from our side, which is we're just really taken with the way in which the image of the body. And we kind of like need the whole diversity of humanity, the body of Christ, to really understand this multi-orb wisdom of God. So you're looking at the source, and I'm kind of thinking about the reading community. And wouldn't it be absolutely amazing if we could design, and digital enables this in a way that it's just not been really possible, that when we're reading, we're able to experience how Christians in other cultures are reading this text, what different layers of meaning are actually coming out because of the way that their language is structured differently, the way that their metaphors are different. And if you want to feel for what I mean by this, check out the Bible Society tool called tips, TIPS, translation.bible. It's really cool. You'll enjoy it. Go to some of your favorite passages and see how translators have had to wrestle with how to translate concepts that might be really familiar in other languages, and how it's really interesting. But how could we create an environment where we're almost like reading alongside Christians in completely different cultural environments, and they see Jesus in ways like, wow, that's amazing. I'd never thought of that before, never seen that dimension of the wisdom of God. So that's kind of a dream I have. I'm not, I think dreaming some of these dreams about what could we do in this amazing medium is a really exciting at this stage, because we're so early. It's barely begun. And I totally agree with you. We've always been at the forefront of this, and we shouldn't be afraid of pressing into it. I don't think we need to be fearful. So, yeah, absolutely pumped by what you said, John. Thanks.
Guys, I'm going to open up the floor in just a minute. So, if you have questions, you can maybe post those first in the chat, and then I'll probably ask you to unmute yourself and maybe ask that question, if that's okay. John, did you want to have a go at responding to that?
My apologies. So, Paul, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me pose the question this way. So, Bible Projects is a nonprofit, but it's an organization, and it's got its own power structure. I'm the chairman of the board, so I got some power here. And let's say it is Bible Project that builds the most used Bible in the world in the next decade or something. I was really interested by your sense of control, like this idea of controls and creating healthy ecosystem. I have some ideas of controls that would be really healthy. I mentioned open source, but I'd be curious, what are the questions you'd be asking? What kind of controls, what kind of things? So, I think we could also learn from some of the mistakes maybe we made in other revolutions around the Bible, perhaps. Maybe that's one way at it. But what are your thoughts in terms of when you think about some brand new kind of IP being created around how the Bible is engaged?
Yeah, that's a really good question, John. I think that the part of my concern around controls is there was an element there of saying we need to design with these potential pitfalls in mind. But actually, it's more about avoiding the wrong kind of control. So, in an oral culture, the speaker has control. And it's interesting, there's a spiritual discipline in which the listener can't change the speed or the volume. You can either attend or not. That's the only choice you've got. And that's quite an interesting spiritual discipline. When I was being Eugene Peterson was one of my teachers a long time ago. And he used to talk about the spiritual discipline of listening to the scripture rather than reading it where you're in control. And so there's interesting things like that. When you think about visual, so the medieval period, at one level, the visual democratized access to the Bible stories by depicting them in, stained glass windows and things like that for a mass illiterate population who couldn't understand the Latin that's being read. But on the other hand, of course, somebody's in control of that space and the way that space is curated. So when I raise the issue of control, I'm kind of just saying we've got to ask the question of the power dynamics at play here. I think you raise a really good point about IP. And on the positive side, we've often thought about IP as something that is appropriate to the extent that there's some sort of recovery of costs for the person who takes the risk. And at one level, that's okay. On the other hand, we want to make the Bible available freely and all of those things. But then we've got the issue of the danger of textual corruption. So for me, that's one of the issues, and it's not how do we openly allow the Bible to be copied, read? Digital Bible library is one of the things that Bible societies are very involved with creating, which is part of what enables all of the apps to run with copies of different translations. But what we're seeing in places like China are at least concerns that is there an attempt by the state to edit the words to make them more palatable to, the Bible has always been a threat to any authoritarian regime. That's why it's always been banned. So that's why textual corruption becomes a challenge. In the slave era, the powers that were invested in keeping slavery edited the Bible because the Bible undermined that position. They just kept in selected, parts of the Bible that they could appeal to and edited out everything else. So this is where it's very complex how we think about the controls and the openness in this digital space. But it maybe we feel that, and I'd love to know what other people, who probably thought about this more, feel about this. Have we dealt with that problem of textual corruption in the academy now? We've got, quite a strong basis of, this is the Hebrew and the Greek text, and maybe everything else is okay as long as you can be referenced against that. Or is corruption of text actually still a real problem because people don't have access to any way of checking it that is meaningful for most people? So I think this is what I wanted to problematize rather than I'm raising more questions than I'm solving.
John, how have you grappled with these issues? Because obviously you also, and this is not a critique, but you're explaining yourself as you're an explainer. So there's already a level of interpretation, right?
Yeah.
And so and actually the just sheer success of what you've done means actually that your team has a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
And how people engage and then interpret the Bible.
Right. Yeah, and we have a really strong position on what the Bible is and isn't, which has resonated a lot with a lot of people. Paul, you talked about us being in a place where there's kind of this new confidence or at least intrigue in the Bible, and I think it's largely by coming to it on its own terms and not turning it into something it's not. But who gets to say what the Bible is and what the Bible is not? And so that's where the Bible is communal literature, and we need to read it in community. And we have that control internally where we read a lot of, I mean, I don't read these books, but our scholars read these books. We have a scholar team, a growing scholar team that goes over things. I mean, obviously we're in our own bubble, but we really want to lean into that communal aspect. We think of ourselves as an ecumenical organization, so we want to figure out how do we frame things up where someone who is like ultra reformed all the way to someone who's very orthodox in some other tradition like can both engage and go, yes, this is helpful. And so that's an interesting control for us. And then just being a nonprofit is a control. I mean, that's not a unique thing. But that isn't enough because nonprofits can become problematic. So the 7-year cycle that I mentioned is another control for us. Every 7 years, we put everything on the table and we ask, are we the right people to be doing this still? We believe in the mission, I think, hopefully we do, but are we the right organization to be operating off of this mission and taking this money and doing these things or not? And put everything on the table. And we're still kind of designing, like, I've only done it once, and it was very soft, and so our second time around is going to be a lot bigger because we are a bigger organization. Open source, we're really committed to open source. We haven't yet figured it out though, so that's kind of like saying like I will marry you, but still never putting on a ring. So take that with as it is. Yeah, those are some of our thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'm going to open up the floor now, and Midas, do you want to unmute yourself? And I don't know if you can do that directly yourself or the team does it, but just go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's working. Lovely, thank you. Yeah, question. Paul, you talked about textual corruption, and I think we've got a different and a new way that could happen with generative search, where basically these new search engines are starting to scrape the internet and assemble their own responses to queries that people are putting in. And if you think that the Bible's complicated at the best of times, we all know this. It's really difficult. No one has perfect theology. And the idea that an algorithm is going to somehow create a response to something, and we know based on far less controversial things that the things that these algorithms, the responses these algorithms are generating are flawed and problematic. How much more so with something, as controversial, potentially controversial and difficult to grapple with as the Bible. And I think particularly for people who are trying to experience the Bible for the first time, these generative search experiences can introduce a new kind of textual corruption. And where we don't have visibility of the algorithms that are shaping these experiences, I think that's a really tricky place. And I wonder how much the church can contribute to that, and to what extent we're locked out of being able to contribute to that textual corruption piece. I think I think somebody said something along the lines of we've managed to sort of deal with that from an institutional perspective. But when it comes outside the institution and we don't have that control, how do we manage that?
I think you asked me the question. I'll start, but I'm sure other people will have better answers. I think two things to say. One is I think this is partly why it's really important to have a healthy ecosystem of mediums. So we want more and better digital, but we also want oral, visual, print mediums as well. So one of the first things I want to do if somebody's engaging with a digital Bible is to offer them an oral, a read Bible, a Bible in audio, and a print Bible. For instance, I think the other primary, we're never going to get rid of the sort of corruption you're describing, but a reading community is an incredibly good safeguard against that and many other forms of corrupting influence. And we know that this is true in many other domains, that if we rely on simply what we can discover from an internet search by ourselves, unless we have subject matter expertise, we will be led astray by that in the end. And we will need help from a community to discern how to filter that. And that's absolutely true when it comes to Bible reading and Bible response.
Well, it's a great provocative question. And I think the community thing is at the center of the answer for me, as far as I understand the answer so far. It's interesting to think about AI as part of our community of reading. And it's going to become that. But just this interaction of me and an AI, that's not community. So it's like me and my community with AI tools. There's something there. Because AI tools, we know they hallucinate, and we know there's going to change. But they also give us access to the larger community of thinking, because they are just trying to pull in data that they've scraped. And they will get better and better at just saying, tell me what, we were just talking about Spurgeon. Tell me what Spurgeon would have thought about this. And right now it might hallucinate and say some dumb things, but it'll get better and better. And then now you can kind of invite the ghost of Spurgeon into your community. So it's interesting. So there's as many advantages as disadvantages, I think Paul said earlier. And so we're going to find those, but we need to do it in community.
Okay, thank you very much. Sarah, did you want to maybe ask your question and explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I was just wondering, really, based on Paul's apparent emphasis on concern about recouping costs, managing risks, and textual corruption, versus John's approach of open source. is there a difference here between our concern for the text and the textual corruption type issues versus perhaps the concept of open source versus IP? Can we be careful with the text but still have complete freely available technology coming out of the protected text or handling of the text? So it's just about text versus technology in terms of control, and are we different in how we handle the text and how we handle the technology in terms of control and IP?
Yeah, I think I understand the distinction you're making, and I think there's something there for sure. That I've found it really interesting that a lot of how we come to appreciate the text is through a translation, and often a translation that we get really comfortable with might even get really tribal with, and that translation is a very genuine attempt to not corrupt the text, but get to the meaning of the text. And then these translations historically have been owned by IP holders who've created them. And like Paul brought out, like, you need to compensate a group to go take the risk to bring a bunch of scholars together to create the translation. But it feels like we're moving into a new era where, like, we can move beyond that. We have a lot of translations, and we're constantly translating, and language is fluid, and the Bible is famous for word plays. So what's the right word to translate when it has two different meanings? And so can you open source the text? Can we stop getting as tribal around translations? And can we do that all while trying to really be honest with what the Bible is trying to say, and not make the Bible say what we want it to say, which is probably the most corruptive impulse. Is I just want the Bible to say what I want it to say so I can have power, versus let the Bible have power over me by saying what it meant to say. And yeah, I do see a way through it, and I think the way you're talking about is a good frame for that.
Yeah, I suppose again, I think it's really complex. So another layer to this, right? So I agree with what Jon said, and I agree with the sort of basis of the question that these are conceptually separate things, but in actual practice, there's not really an example of a text that's not an embedded technology. So, because, and the reason for that is very few of us have the education to directly access the Hebrew and the Greek texts. And even if we did, we probably don't have at the same time, there's only a very small number of people to understand the textual critical questions involved in deciding which text is in fact the right text, where we've got choices to make. So what that means is that we're all receiving something that is both a text and a technological interpretation, if you like, or formation, instantiation of that text. And I think that's what makes this complicated. But there's another layer too, because throughout the history of the church, this has been understood. This has been a real battleground because of things like the Gnostic controversies, the attempts to bring heresy into the Christian discourse, which led to ecclesial communities and the leaders of those ecclesial communities to protect the community by distinguishing what was authentically apostolic witness and what was not. And so that has come from, in every tradition, some form of ecclesial leadership. So I think that you can't get away from the ecclesial community. I think it's incredibly dangerous, in fact, to get away from the ability of the ecclesial community, however that leadership is understood, to have some kind of discerning, the Catholic word is imprimatur, to say, you can trust this. And so different traditions have different ways of doing that, but we all have some way of doing that, which is why we've got confidence to share and kind of know that we're talking about the same thing when we talk about the Bible and when we reference a verse. So I don't think you can quite get away from this, but it is very complex because there's got to be the right balance between these sort of kind of competing things. You don't want too much control in a small group, but equally you can't have a free-for-all. So this is where the complexity comes, and we've tended to work this out as a Christian community. I love the way you started, John, and maybe you want to riff off this a bit, but that we faced all of this before, and we've worked through these challenges before, and we're going to have to do it all over again. I mean, the print revolution raised all of these questions. This is why people were fighting over and banning the Bible and burning it and burning the people who translated it, and both sides, or all three sides at the time. So I think, it could get quite heated, couldn't it? In that sense, perhaps we need to be cautious about how we approach this.
Yeah, maybe I should just add to that as well, though, that maybe there isn't this. It's also dangerous to idealize that interpretive community, especially in an ecclesial context, because we also know from history that very ecclesial community safeguards the Bible, which is also had led to exclusionary practice as well. So I hear what you're saying, but I think I just want to add that caveat there to it as well.
Yeah, that's the prophetic voice, isn't it? How do you get the prophetic voice challenging? You're not listening to the voice of the scripture. That's exactly it. There's so many layers here that we want in place.
Okay, thank you. George, do you want to come in?
Yes, hello. Thanks, guys, for your opening comments and everything. I found it really encouraging, John, what you said. It's about your guys' approach to the Bible. I was particularly interested when you were talking about you guys want to create the new Bible, right? Like a new version of the Bible. I love the example that you used of like a paper map and then a satellite map, and then what a new Bible with that would actually be. And to me, you're very clearly talking about using like gaming technology, right? So stuff like virtual reality, Unity, Unreal Engine, all of that type of stuff. So I wanted to hear your thoughts more about using gaming technology to create that type of Bible that you were talking about. And, where have you guys gone? How far have you guys gone with your efforts? Because I love your videos. I feel that type of animation and artwork that you guys have is just so in line with like gaming culture and virtual reality experiences. To create experience, not just the game that you just play, but to create an actual experience of the Bible. To me, that's clearly the future. And I think that that's kind of the trajectory of what you're saying as well. I can imagine just kind of sitting in the middle of one of your videos with the Oculus, and it would just be like literally like the coolest thing ever. Do you know what I mean? So I was just wondering, like, is that exactly what you were talking about? And, just your thoughts on the whole gamification stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think there's kind of two categories of communication technology that I'm thinking through, and you've put them together. One is a new way to interact, a new Chrome, which is AR VR, which Apple is trying to take the leadership on with their new Vision OS next year, and it's just going to be a new way to interact with information, interact with media, interact with everything, and that's huge. And as an explainer, I think that's really important for me to understand and work in. And then as Christians, it's a new communication technology that we get to participate in. And then there's also like gamification theory, which is different. It kind of transcends. It could be on an iPhone, it could be on a Nintendo Switch, and it can be in some new AR VR environment. And that's like really interesting as well. Like, how do you make things addictive? How do you create an open world that you can just explore, but allow yourself to feel progress and actually level up and all this stuff? And there's something, game designers are at the forefront of figuring that out and applying that in the right way to learning how to study the Bible and community as Jewish meditation literature is really fascinating, and we are trying to figure it out. With the new Bible, though, I'm not sure. I mean, we're gonna have to play around with AR, VR, and how it fits into there. We're gonna have to think about gamification, but right now we're really just laser focused more on just what's the right features. Like at a certain elevation and you're in a certain mode, like what are the best ways to interact and to kind of get an aha experience? That's kind of where we're at currently, before we get into how that looks like on a phone or in VR, and then how do we make sure that people can go on a journey. It would be cool. We have this like kind of like North Star of like making it like a Zelda open world where you're like exploring the Bible, side quests, doing it in your own pace, but it's all building to some grand narrative and some grand story that you and it's the Bible's big, it's complicated, there's a lot to it, and so it's a pretty daunting task, but we're really interested in that. So yeah, George, I'd love to talk more. I'd love to hear more about the success you've had in the gaming and educational gaming. And I think because we're pretty early in a lot of that thinking.
Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, George has done some really cool stuff, so it's worth having a chat with him. I'm afraid we're gonna have to end the panel here. But please hang on and stay and chat a bit longer and use the chat and breakout rooms that are there in the channels. So we are at the moment thinking about applying another event around January, February time sometime. So please stay tuned on that. I think that is what I needed to tell you. I just want to plug the MA in Digital Theology as well, because that's what I run and I think is brilliant. And it is really helping informing people thinking about these issues, not only the Bible, but more broadly about what faith looks like in a digital culture. And we're really trying to prepare the church for the current and the future as well. So talk to me about that. Stay around, talk to Paul and John. And again, thank you, Toby, as well, and team for hosting us and organizing this, and for our speakers. So see you around.